Okay everybody, back working on the Polaris again today. So, got all my parts now. It's probably been about a month I think. So I've got all the parts over here. I'll talk about that in a sec. So today, gonna try and get that head reassembled and get the engine all reassembled. Try and get it back into the chassis. Dad's gonna give me a little bit of a hand. Goal is if I can try and at least get it started today and running, then I'll be happy with that. And then what I'll do is I'll have it, because it'll all be joined back up to the frame again. I won't put any covers back on, because then I'll rip those wheels off and replace those drive shafts and all those worn out bushes on the control arms. Like I said I was going to do, and that'll just make it a little bit easier. So then once that's done, it'll be all finished and we can run it in properly and take it for a ride and all that sort of stuff. So I'll come over to the workbench here and we'll have a talk about the head and the parts I've got for it. Alright, so here's the head. As you can see, it's a little bit cleaner than the cylinder there. So I took this to work and gave it a good clean. So put it in the ultrasonic bath for about 6 hours, I think it was. And because this exhaust port was so blocked, I still had to scratch all the carbon out with a screwdriver. But now it's a hell of a lot cleaner. And yeah, obviously pulled the valves out, the rockers, the cam. The lobes on the cam, they had a tiny little bit of pitting. You won't be able to see it there now. Basically that was sort of on the edge of being like, is it going to go again, will it not? So what I ended up doing, I took it down to John down at North Geelong Engines, who did a lot of the engine work on my ute. If you have been following along from the channel from that long, you'll know that I rebuilt the ute. If not, I'll chuck a card up if you're interested in it. And basically he had a look at it, he's like, yeah, we can just give that a polish up. And he went out the back, polished it up, did it all for free, so shout out to him. So yeah, it turned out pretty good, so that cam should be right to go again. So that's all basically what's happened with, that's what I've done with that, with the head, since I took it. And we sort of determined, we took measurements of this piston, the rings. I can't remember the measurements exactly, it was a few weeks ago now. But basically we determined that the piston and the rings were still tight and that oil wasn't leaking past them. So then we took the valves apart, had a look at the stem seals, which I have one here. So here's a valve stem seal, and that stops oil leaking down the valve and into your engine. We had a look at that and we determined that they felt loose on the valve, and we thought that's got to be where the oil's come from. It's leaking down the exhaust valve and around the exhaust. But that's why there's so much carbon built up around the exhaust, because of that. So yeah, ordered all the parts and now we've got them all here today. So we'll try and assemble all this, and we'll go through a few steps of what I'm doing. And yeah, so I'll get myself set up and then we'll begin the process of putting this back together. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to reassemble the valves. Now, I need to clean up the valve seats. So what I've got is valve grinding compound. Basically, it sort of acts, it's like an abrasive, and basically you put it around the seat of the valve, along that edge around there, and you sit the valve into the head. I'll show you all this. And then you have your special tool here, which has got a suction cup on there, and you spin it around, and it sort of acts like sandpaper, I guess. And it takes any like pitting, like discoloration, any carbon that's still left on there. Should take all that off, and it makes like a better seating surface, and it'll make the valve seal better. So that's what I'm going to do first. And I'm no expert on this either, so there's probably better videos out there explaining how you do it and how you do it properly. Yeah, so I'll get it, my valve set up. What I'll do is I'll put a little bit of engine assembly lube just on the stem itself. So it's got some sort of lube on there to sort of keep it nice and free when it's in the head. And then we'll put a little bit of valve paste on there, and we'll spin it up, and I'll show you sort of how you do it. Okay, so we're going to do the exhaust valve first. So what I'll do is I'll put a little bit of assembly lube up on here, give it a little bit of lubrication, and I'll apply the compound around the rim. We'll stick that into the head, and then we'll give it a spin and see what it comes up like. And we'll clean out any of these. Well, you got to clean up all the compound anyway when you pull it apart, but we'll clean out any excess stuff because we don't want it filling up the bloody exhaust port after I've just cleaned it. So that's all lubed up. I'm just using, as you would have seen before, just the CRC assembly lube. This stuff's pretty good. It stays tacky and keeps your engine lubed for longer over oil when you start it up, which is good if you've got to wait for oil to get around all your parts, obviously. You would have seen I've used that in the motorbike rebuild. I also used it on the ute when I rebuilt that. Alrighty, so now we'll put a bit of this paste around the edge. Oop, almost lost it. It's going to be really hard to pick up on camera, I think, but it's very, like, looks metallic-y. I guess there's whatever they put in there, the grit they put in there, gives it that sort of look. So now we'll slip that into the head. Okay, so that's in the head now. So now we'll get our valve grinding tool here. It's got like a suction cup on each end. There's different sizes. This has got the two smallest one. There's a big one over there. We'll stick it on top of the valve and basically you just do this. And you can hear that and you'll hear it like get finer. Lost our suction. Well, you gotta try and keep this valve from getting the stuff all over it because it makes it slip. We'll give this a wipe off. Basically, it sounds like it's real coarse there for a while, and then it does peter off to a more nicer sounding sound. So I'll give it a quick wipe off just to see what's happening, and we can always apply more and keep going. So you can see it has made a mark right around the valve there. It's very smooth. But we'll have a look inside the head and see if we need to do a bit more. So I've had a look, it looks not too bad. I think we can put a little bit more on and go for a little bit longer. They say to do it for about a minute and then check it, but we didn't really do it for a minute. We'll bugger it around there. So I'll apply a little bit more compound and we'll go again. Once again, she's covering stuff. Alright, we'll have another look at that now. When we've done both valves, we'll have to give them a real good clean. Clean out the engine, the head, clean out where the valve runs through to make sure that there's no grit in there. Because that'll wear our valves out. Alright, that looks pretty good. So it'll be hard to see on the camera, But if you see where my thumbnail is, directly below that is the line we've been grinding. Below that is just, well, that's where the valve is not touching, so that's not going to grind. But you can see that that outer ring is very clean, pretty smooth. There doesn't seem to be any marks on it. So I think that's pretty good. And if you look at this one, which is the inlet, you can see it's a lot dirtier. I can see like some like sort of almost pitting marks. You won't be able to see it on the camera. So basically that's pretty much how you do it. Probably could have gone a little bit longer, but I don't want to take too much off it. And that seems pretty good there, as long as it's going to seal up all right. And there's no reason why it shouldn't anyway. But this is just extra preventative stuff to do to make sure that we give it every chance that it can to run nicely. So what I'll do is I will do the inlet valve as well, and then I'll clean it all up again, and then we'll come back when I'm ready to assemble the valves back into the head. All right, so I've done both the valves, like I've ground down their seats. Both come up pretty good, I reckon, so they should have the best chance they've got at seating properly. I've brake cleaned all that, cleaned out any of that grit. You gotta make sure you don't get any in the valve guides because it'll chew your valves to pieces. Clean it all out, so now that should be really clean. So now we're gonna try and assemble these valves back in. I've got a valve spring compression tool here, which worked on one of the valves. The other side I couldn't get it in properly, so I had to do it with a special pair of pliers. But we'll see how we go. I might need to wait until Dad comes back to give me a hand to put the collets back in, which are these little things here, which sit up around the end of the valve in that groove, and they hold the valve tight in the spring. I'll get the valves in and we'll sit something under there to hold them up, and then we'll try and get the springs back on, and hopefully that goes all good. We'll just do one at a time. I'll put some engine lube on the, we'll start off with the inlet valve. Just put some engine lube on it again because I've cleaned it all off. Just so there's something in the guide to keep it lubed. Let that slide in like so. Just going to wipe off any excess stuff on the guide that comes off. I just don't want that filled up with too much crap after I've cleaned it. Alright. Oh, no, I suppose we can put both in now. So, do the same on the exhaust valve. Alright, they're both in. So I'll get a small rag now, just sort of bunch it up. Just sit inside there to hold those two valves up. That'll hold them up to make it a little bit easier. So, got the valves poking out now, where they need to be. So I'll grab the old springs, which should be still fine, put them on, and then we'll get ready to put the collets in. Hopefully that all goes swimmingly. Just put a little bit of engine lube just around the bottom of the springs where they'll run. Alright. So what this does is it clamps around the bottom, well, part of the spring there. You wind this in, and that clamp compresses the spring, and you can drop your collets in. So I have to use a washer on top of the spring there just to give it a bit more surface area to grip onto that there. But I'll set it up and I'll give you a closer view of what it looks like. Right, so it's pretty fiddly, but you can see that's compressed the spring. And now I should be able to get those collets in around the stem of the valve. So I'll try and do that now. All right, well, I had a prick of a time getting that on. So fiddly, just took forever. But you can see I got the two collets in there now. So they're holding that spring down. So that's the exhaust valve sorted. So that should be all good now. So now I can go try and get this one. Might have to wait until Dad gets back to give me a hand to push that down because you can't fit this stupid thing in there because of these alloy parts. So I might have to wait for Dad to come down, back and push that down for me, and then I can slip the collets in. Alright, so I just realised I made a mistake. Should have put the valve stem seals on as well, which I forgot to do. So I'm going to have to pull this valve spring back off. So I'll get the valve stem seals and put them on now, and then I'll redo that spring. So here's our new stem seal. So this is for the inlet. So we can slip that over, which is much tighter. Alrighty, so I've got the valve stem seal on this inlet port, or valve, sorry. So I can chuck that spring back on. I'll have to pull that one apart and put the valve stem seal on there as well. Well, looks like we're done for the day. Because me being the rough prick that I am, wrecked this valve stem seal, which is the exhaust one. So now I'm gonna have to get another one. So there goes that idea of actually getting this thing done today. That is very, very annoying. So I guess now I will have to order another one of those. Wait for it to come in. Oh well, here's what it is. So I'll see you back here when I've got another valve stem seal. Might be in a week, might be in 3 weeks, who knows. So yeah. Morning everybody, I'm back again with those valve stem seals. So when I picked up 2 new ones, luckily they came within a few days and it's been a week. So it's last Saturday, now it's Saturday again. So I've got those valve stem seals. I also went and picked up a tool for installing them, which is this thing here. And this is the installing side of it. There's also a set of pliers which you can use for removing them, but you can also use them for installing. But I think this is probably a little bit better, get it on more even. Basically it comes with a bunch of adapters. This stick on here that goes through the stem seal, and then you'll see that it will sit up in top of there. Then it screws into your punch end here, and you just knock that on with a hammer. I'll get the set. So this is the set, different sizes. I'm assuming this is like an extension, a couple of extensions there for getting into deeper heads, I guess. All different sizes. This is the pliers here for removing them, and you see it just sort of clamps around them, and they're not too bad. I was playing around with the old seals, seeing what they were like to pull on and off with it. So that's the standard, made by Dohne. Just picked it up at Sydney Tools. It was about $56. So not overly expensive, it's pretty affordable. So yeah, hopefully that'll do the trick and we'll be able to get those seals on there without buggering up. Because if I bugger these ones up, I don't know what I'm going to do. Anywho, so we'll take off where we left off, and I'll get these seals installed, and we'll put the valves back in and put the springs on. And then we can cross that off and start putting the cam back in, and the rockers and whatever. So we'll start making a bit of headway and we'll crack on. We'll start off on the inlet side. Get that one on. Put a little bit more lube on that valve guide. So as you see here, you get your valve like that, the valve stem, sorry. And then that just slips in on the end here, like so. And then you just slip that in your valve guide. Get it roughly square and give it a few taps down. Just until you hear it go. Make that hard ringing sound to say that's all the way down. That's in. That looks pretty square, so I'll get the inlet valve. So I've got the inlet valve, we'll slip that back through and just see that the tension's right. Yeah, it's got good tension on there. So I think that should be pretty good. Alright, so we'll do the exhaust one next. Same deal. Just slip the seal on over into the installer like so. Then put that on. And give it a few taps down. Right. That one looks pretty good too, so hopefully they should be pretty alright. They didn't wreck them, so that's one good thing. And I'll slip this exhaust valve through. Make sure she's got some good tension on there, because this is the one that was leaking. Yeah, that feels a lot better than what it did with the old ones. Alright, so they're in. Now I can go back to putting the springs on, which is where I was at last time, but forgot to put the seals in. So I can do that now. So you know what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use the tool again and get them on. I'll probably turn the camera off because it's so goddamn fiddly. And it'll probably take me a while to actually get them clamped down. So I'll come back to you when the valve springs put back on properly and I've got the little collets in, and then we'll move on to the cam. Alright, got the valve springs in with the collets, so they're all assembled. So, and I've put a heap of engine assembly lube where the rocker shaft goes and where the camshaft goes. So now I'm ready to lube up this camshaft, and then we'll slip that in. The timing gear, or the chain gear, will go on after we get the head back on the engine, because you have to feed the chain around it. So we'll put the cam in, then we'll put the rockers in, and then we should be getting close to putting the piston back together and get the cylinder back on. So we'll give this a good lube up and slide it in. Alright, so that's pretty caked in it, so we'll slip the cam back in. Alrighty, so the cam's back in there now. Give her a quick little spin around just to make sure she spins freely. There's no reason why it shouldn't, but we'll just do it anyway. So now we can do the rockers as well. So you need to, when you pull this apart, I can't remember if I said it in the video when I did pull it apart, you need to just make sure you get it, pull it apart and mark it so that it'll go back to the same way. So I've got that all marked: E, exhaust, I, inlet, and then a couple of arrows to line up to tell me which way it needs to go. So it needs to sit like that. So pull that off, slip that in there like so. Might chuck a little bit of a lube on that first, but go to town with the lube. I'll cover it in oil as well, but you just want to make sure everything's filled, because it will take a little bit for the oil to pump up around it, and there's no way the oil's getting up there until the engine's started. So we just need to make sure we get plenty of oil on oil and assembly lube on everything. So one more thing before I put these rockers on. When I spoke to John, who polished up that cam, he said to me about the rockers that he said, oh, they worn or whatever, and I said, oh, they're not too bad. There is a bit of wear, but we'll get away with it. He said, get some fine emery paper and cross hatch it to hold the oil a bit better, because there's no cross hatching or anything on there. So what I've done is I just got some little fine emery paper and just went across one way and then back the other way. So basically it's like you're trying to make a cross on it. What that does is put some very fine cross hatching on the rocker, and then that should hold some oil a little bit better. So just a little tip there. So I'll just put some more cross hatching on this one. I don't know if you're about to pick that up in the camera or not. Probably not, it's pretty fine. But that'll just help hold some oil. So we'll get this second one on there now. Lube up everything that's gonna be touching metal. Alright, so the rocker shaft is through both of those rockers. So now we just put this spring washer on there that sort of keeps them centralised. Alright, so now that rocker shaft is in there with the rockers. Just wipe off some of this excess lube. Alright, so now if we wanted to, we could adjust the valve clearances, which I've got the specs for, but I want to get it into the, I want to get it all assembled first and then do it with it in place. We could do it here, it is on the rock, so it wouldn't be hard, but I'd just like to get it all assembled first and then worry about the clearances when she's all assembled back together on the rest of the engine. So I think that's pretty much, yeah, that's pretty much all of the head reassembled. We've still got to put this gear on, but that goes on when we get it back on the block, because we'll have to run that chain around. And yeah, so we'll start worrying about putting the piston together now.